So if you listened to my last episode about ancient texts and how some of them keep finding their way into people's lives, you'll remember I mentioned the Emerald Tablet. I'll probably talk about the other ones too, but this one was on my mind, and usually if I leave something on my mind too long, it doesn't go too well, so I had to get it out. Now, I'm not suggesting the Emerald Tablet was secretly describing polyvagal theory, vagus nerves, or trauma responses centuries before neuroscience existed. I'm also not trying to retrofit ancient symbolism into modern science to make it sound smarter. What I'm doing, again, is noticing patterns, which you know I love. Over time, reading the tablet alongside psychology, somatics, meditation practice, and watching how people actually change, I saw something familiar start to take shape. The language is definitely different, and the metaphors are older, but the movement here feels the same. Usually when people quote, "as above, so below," it's treated like a mystical slogan. But if you read it slowly, it doesn't sound like a belief being imposed. It sounds like someone pointing at something that keeps happening. Inner states echo outward, outer conditions press inward. Change that happens in only one place rarely holds, which I've said before, but I really believe that. This is exactly what shows up in nervous system work. You can understand your trauma perfectly and still react the same way. You can meditate beautifully and still snap at the people you love. Insight alone doesn't reorganize the body, and bodily calm without insight doesn't last either. Regulation seems to require correspondence, multiple layers moving and working together. When people finally experience lasting change, it's rarely because they figured something out. It's usually because their thoughts, emotions, breath, posture, and sense of safety begin to align. Above and below start talking to each other. I think alchemy gets dismissed because people imagine literal lead and gold. But psychologically, alchemy reads like an early attempt to describe integration. Heat is applied, things break down, substances combine, something volatile settles, and something rigid softens. I don't think that's far from what happens during trauma processing, deep meditation, or somatic release. The nervous system goes through phases of activation and settling. Old patterns dissolve, and new ones don't appear instantly. There's that unstable middle where things feel worse before they feel coherent. I think the tablet's insistence on patience, timing, and balance feels less like superstition and more like respect for how transformation actually unfolds. One of the most consistent patterns I've noticed in teaching meditation is that people often reach clarity before they reach capacity. They'll see something true about themselves, maybe about impermanence, maybe about attachment, maybe about fear, and then they wonder why their body didn't get the memo. The nervous system doesn't change simply because it's been told a better story. It usually changes because it experiences safety, rhythm, repetition, and coherence over time. It seems like the Emerald Tablet seems to understand this intuitively, that transformation isn't instantaneous. It's a cultivated process. It's paced and relational. The work doesn't seem to happen in one realm. It happens across realms. I think if you wanted to map the tablet onto modern language, the nervous system sits right in the middle. It translates inner meaning into outward behavior. It carries memory without narrative. It reacts faster than thought, and it decides what feels possible long before logic gets involved. When the nervous system is dysregulated, the world feels hostile, chaotic, or even overwhelming. When it's regulated, the very same world feels workable, and in some cases, even kind. Nothing external has changed, but something internal has shifted. Above and below recalibrate. I think this is why meditation that ignores the body often stalls, and why somatic work without meaning can feel empty. The system wants and needs coherence, not fragments. And for me, I don't think people are suddenly interested in the Emerald Tablet because they want esoteric trivia or they heard Joe Rogan talk about it. Is it even really sudden, or has it been building steadily over time? I think they're interested because modern life has pushed nervous systems well past their limits. People are overstimulated, under-resourced, constantly interpreting threat where none exists, or numb where something should be felt. When they encounter language that suggests reality is interconnected and responsive, it feels like real relief. Not in a mystical, mumbo-jumbo, hippy-dippy, new age way, but because it actually matches our lived experience. I've watched people chase awakening for years, including myself, collecting insights while our bodies stay braced. And I've watched others, in silence, working with breath, sensation, and attention, slowly reorganize their lives without ever using spiritual language at all. It seems like when real change happens, it doesn't announce itself. It just feels like less friction and more choice. Like there's a wider pause between impulse and action. The Emerald Tablet doesn't promise transcendence. It seems more focused on alignment, and in things finally talking to each other instead of pulling in opposite directions. I'd love to talk about this forever, but maybe as above, so below survives because it keeps describing the same subtle and undeniable truth, that human beings don't change by escaping ourselves, but rather by bringing our inner and outer worlds into conversation. Not in a perfect way, and not forever, but enough to breathe differently. And sometimes I think that's the real gold, the thing we've been looking for all along: integration.